It is important to note that Alicia's death happens as a result of the reckless pursuit of her desires. Alicia's fate was sealed the moment she consumed the ghoul powder. She committed a suicidal act, and did so without any hesitation or fear. But her willpower prevented her from dying until she accomplished what she set out to do, which is why she made it clear near the end of the game that she would become the vessel of the 3 Valkyries, knowing that she would die in the process. Even with Bram's insistence on becoming the vessel himself, Alicia insisted that she had to be the one. In truth, Alicia's situation was no different from Bram's, as she was already undead. Just like him, she merely continues to live through willpower alone. Alicia and Bram's death at the end of the game symbolises that the mission was complete, and that both of them could finally accept their fate. The truth is, Alicia wanted to die the whole time. But much like Botsigar Sorfang in Warcraft's War of the Ancients trilogy, Alicia wasn't just going to throw her life away for nothing. She wanted to devote the remainder of her life towards saving Midgard, and was more than willing to die for that purpose. She specifically wanted to sacrifice herself for a good cause, even though those around her tried to stop her from doing so. It is here that Alicia's suicide mission would finally end, and the result of this is a world where man etches fate anew, hence the subtitle in the logo of the game. So to answer the question of what Valkyrie Profile 2 means to me, Valkyrie Profile 2 is the telling of a tragic story, painted in a sublime facade of beauty. Unlike the first game, which paints its world in a more transparently grim tone, Valkyrie Profile 2 does not. The narrative theme strongly contrasts with the beauteous presentation of the game, but the emotions brought about by said presentation heavily reflects the tone of the narrative to the point that you can't help but feel connected in Alicia's experience, regardless of whether or not you care about written narrative in games. While the same could be said for the first Valkyrie Profile game, I appreciate the second game so much more, simply because it told its story in a more interesting way due to its lighter tone, acting as a facade. It is also important to remember that in the original timeline, it is likely that Alicia's journey ended at the top of Yggdrasil, failing to accomplish her mission, which leads into the events of the first Valkyrie Profile, where the world is dark and grim as a result. Valkyrie Profile 2 is best described as being in a neutral state, which is strongly conveyed by the visual style of the game, as unlike other games which use a vibrant colour scheme to bring their environments to life, Valkyrie Profile 2 relies solely on darker colours to blend in with its gritty atmosphere. To make up for its lack of vibrancy, Valkyrie Profile 2's impressive usage of shading, lighting and detail brings the best out of its limited colour scheme, bringing about a rather unique tone, a realistic depiction of a world where everything is neutral, nothing more, nothing less. Valkyrie Profile 2 is not a light-hearted game, nor is it a depressing game. It is set in an imperfect world, with a brutal history that just happens to be in a state of tranquility around the time the events of Valkyrie Profile 2 takes place. If you bothered to read the biographies of the various Einherjar you acquired over the course of the game, you would be well aware of this brutal history. A world that is trapped in a constant state of tension and terror is enjoying a brief moment of respite before the impending doom that would later be seen in the first Valkyrie Profile. This is why experiencing both games back to back is vital to truly appreciate the Valkyrie Profile series, as both games work in each other's favour to create one of the most interesting worlds in video game history. That being said, however, there is a strong connection between the world and the story. I think the visuals do a fantastic job at conveying this, as its neutral tone feels completely distant from the events of the narrative, save for the ravine caverns of course. There are some gorgeous looking landscapes in this game, which feel strange when accompanied by such a sombre plot, but surely there's a reason for this harsh contrast. One might say that it brings about a depiction of apathy. While the first Valkyrie Profile's world is clearly in turmoil with its dark tone, the apathy brought about by Valkyrie Profile 2's atmosphere is far more brutal, as it makes Alicia's suffering feel all the more isolated, as the world around her does not express the same amount of pain, whereas the first game's world does, as everyone is suffering. In that regard, Valkyrie Profile comes across as an exaggeration of bleakness, whereas Valkyrie Profile 2 comes across as the grim reality of isolated suffering in a world where many remain content. Sure, the citizens of Japan suffered the loss of their home, but the people of other nations are completely unaffected by the events of Chapter 4, continuing on as if nothing ever happened. turning a blind eye to it all in the selfish way that we humans typically do. This also applies to why Alicia and Rufus have a strong connection, as while his situation is nowhere near as grim as Alicia's, Rufus goes through struggles of his own, dealing with his own anxieties, which is heavily amplified by the death of Rosalie, who appears to be connected to Rufus in some way. By sharing in each other's pain, they are able to combat the apathy surrounding them. This brings forth a thin layer of hope in their nigh hopeless situation. What makes the Valkyrie Profile series so great is the fact that it is one of the few JRPG series that actually challenges you to think for yourself rather than have the game tell you. Unlike most JRPGs which have a happy ending, Valkyrie Profile 2's ending is fiercely neutral. In fact, the entire ending of the game is spoiled by the game's subtitle on the logo of the game. The destinies mend rifts in time as man etches fate anew. What does this actually mean, you ask? Well, it means exactly what it says. Mankind shall decide the fate of the world now. It is in their hands, since the gods are no more. Is that a good thing, or a bad thing? Well, if you read all the Einherjar backstories that occur prior to the events of Valkyrie Profile 1, you will clearly see that even at the height of Midgard's prosperity, humanity has always suffered, and history has a habit of repeating itself. So when you consider that fact, Valkyrie Profile 2's ending is not a happy ending at all. Quite the contrary. Sure, you killed both tyrants, but it won't be long before another tyrant shows up. Were the sacrifices worth it in the end? Alicia sacrifices her life for nothing but a pipe dream. And considering the fact that every single playable character in the main story dies at some point, were any of their sacrifices worthwhile? My answer is no. Does that mean that humans are destined to be miserable forever? Well, that's not an easy thing to answer, because there's so much more nuance involved. Some of the game's NPCs appear to be content with their lives, so you can't answer with an absolute yes or no. All you can say for certain is that virtually nothing will change, because the real enemy is, and always will be, humanity. Valkyrie Profile 2 deliberately detaches players from its world. Sure, you can talk to NPCs to get an understanding of the state of the world, but you never truly feel connected to the world, because you are constantly being distracted by the mission presented to you. At the same time, however, you can't help but feel that the journey is worthwhile. Valkyrie Profile 2's world is absolutely gorgeous for a reason. It is a reflection of our own world. Many of us forget this as we are too distracted by our daily lives to notice just how gorgeous the world truly is. The true value of life comes from the bounties that the world presents to us. The trouble is that many of us never find those bounties because circumstances separate us from the world. If you take all the supernatural stuff out of the equation, instead focusing on the game's themes as well as the state of the world, it is an accurate reflection of reality. Hence the reason why Valkyrie Profile 2's realistic art style is so fitting, as it is supposed to reflect the beauty and harshness of reality, though with a bit of polish and shine to reflect the supernatural aspects that make the game's universe more interesting. I find that the 2D perspective really helps to amplify this, as each of the locations are created in separate layers that are blended together, much like a painting in the sense that it is an illusion created from a paintbrush, where all the layers blend into each other to create a landscape, as opposed to a 3D game where the goal tends to be to make the game look as close to real life as possible, which doesn't give off the same feeling that Valkyrie Profile 2's visuals do, and that, along with the game's gritty yet striking art style, is what makes Valkyrie Profile 2's visuals so special to me. Hence the reason why I call it a work of art in motion, because its environments literally come across as an animated painting. At the end of the day though, Valkyrie Profile 2 is just a video game. It's not supposed to truly mean anything, and a lot of what I say here is subjective, but the game is thought-provoking enough to make me say all of this stuff, and ultimately that is what matters. The Valkyrie Profile series as a whole left a lasting impression on me, particularly Valkyrie Profile 2, and I wanted to share it with you all just so that you can understand just how passionate I am about this game and why it is and always will be my favourite game of all time.